Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen, and we are here to talk about a very specific yet very broad topic, which is, if you can read the title of this wherever you're watching or listening to this from, is NFL narratives that grind our gears. Basically, what we want to talk about is just stuff that we see on a regular, or maybe even semi-regular basis that really just irks us. And it doesn't necessarily always fall under a particular topic. You know, we just want to be able to get into some things that we don't always get to talk about, or that we do talk about, but maybe not in the same detail that we want to. And that's what tonight's going to be about. But before we get any further, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I will say one thing that grinds my gears before we even get into the big topic is I have a couple different laptops I use for different things. I have a work laptop, I have a gaming laptop, and I have the laptop I'm using for this show. Switching between keyboards that are different sizes really freaking grinds my gears because I keep hitting the wrong buttons on this damn keyboard. It's driving me nuts.
Yeah, I get that. But you have three different laptops. Yeah, that alone would drive me nuts. I'll be honest.
To be fair, one was given to me by work, and the other two, this is just an upgraded one to my gaming, quote unquote, gaming laptop. So.
Even so, I would think that would just drive me nuts. But yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, so I'm very excited to be jumping into this. You went on Twitter, you went on Reddit, you went to a couple different places. We got plenty of responses, but that should not preclude any of you people in the chat, from throwing in your responses. If you think that you have something that you'd like to share that grinds your gears, we will gladly take it and we will discuss it right here on the show. And before we get any further, we do have some business to take care of, and that is going to come in the form of Greg and Aaron from the Cover One flagship show.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron for always being so consistent and immaculate on that ad read every single time. We also have our wonderful friends to thank over at Underdog Fantasy. Folks, we are at the time of year where there's probably not a lot of drafts happening. Maybe there's, keeper league or a dynasty league that you need a redraft in, or whatever is going on. But if one league is not enough for you, if you're just getting annoyed by those guys in your one league, then Underdog Fantasy is for you. It's all of the fun of winning big, all the fun of drafting your own players, but without the waivers and lineup decisions. Best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your team, all the chances to win big, and none of the week-to-week hassle. If you use the promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will max that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. All right. Yeah, we're just gonna. I mean, so you have these laid out in our show notes, and do you want to just go top to bottom in order? And if there's one that we see in the comments, we'll just throw that in here as well.
Yeah, just to start though, because Cole Bishop decided to ruin my day on Twitter.
Yes, let's talk about this first, because this is dumb and a good thing to get off the top.
Yeah, and this might be grinding my gears harder than any of these things that we're going to talk about today. The idea that people have that Fortnite is even in the conversation for greatest video game of all time is insane. it blows my mind that that's even something someone would remotely believe. It's not even remotely close. I can probably name 100 video games that are better than Fortnite, if not more than that. It's insane.
I have probably hold on, I can look right now. I've got about 80 games on Steam right now. Yeah. About 80 games. I would say every single one of those is probably better than Fortnite. And I am not going to hesitate saying that, because like, just because it's popular does not mean that it's good. Mm-hmm. And just because it like found a way to make microtransactions like a viable thing does not make it a good game. If anything, that in itself makes it a bad game. Right? Like, having to deal with that, because then that got poisoned into other games. Mm-hmm. And yeah, may have caused an international incident here or there. Who's to say? But it's just, I don't understand how that's a thing. It's brutal. Stuff like that just drives me insane. There's so many better games. I got called a boomer for saying it. I really, it's astounding to me, man. Like, I got really frustrated today. Really frustrated. Okay. So very, very, very quickly. Top games. I'm not even going to put a number on it. Just give me a couple games that you just love right off the top. Yeah. Red Dead Redemption 2. That was cinema in a video game. Knights of the Old Republic. Incredible. Halo 2 in its prime. World of Warcraft. Like, I could just keep going and going and going and going. And I love the Spider-Man game too. That was better than Fortnite. Like, Fortnite's just not even in that conversation, and people be like, it's the best shooter. Dude. People didn't play OG Call of Duty, didn't play Halo. Like, it's not on, it's the greatest multiplayer. No, it's not. It's not. It's just not. Close. Yeah, I'd probably say, Halo 3, I've been really enjoying Helldivers 2. I love Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order and Knights of the Old Republic 2. X-Wing Alliance, like a lot of different Star Wars. I could throw a lot of games in here, but like Fortnite is not even like a blip on my radar. I don't care about it, and I just don't get it. Let's see. We got some people talking here. Hades is a great game. John Roberts says Buffalo CBS said Buffalo is filling out applications to host the draft in 2028. That would be nice, because the Bills sure aren't getting a chance to host a Super Bowl. So, I feel like, because the draft was like always held in New York City, at some point the NFL was kind of just like, once it started to become this huge event, then the NFL kind of decided, well, if we can get money out of this, like if we can actually make this a big event, why are we just hosting it in New York? Like, we're really going to want to deal with Jets and Giants fans every year for years on end. Like, no, let's just take this somewhere, let some city benefit for a week, and have fun with it. So I like this, and I'm sure Buffalo, because they're having it in Green Bay in 2025, I believe. And if Green Bay can host it, then Buffalo can host it. Like, like at least Buffalo is like an actual city. Like, I'm not trying to like shade Green Bay or anything. Like, Green Bay like has great charm, especially in comparison to the NFL cities, right? Like, it's literally a small market town and city and whatever. But if they can host a draft, the city of Buffalo can host a draft. It's fine. It's fine. Just typical what it do. Also says NHL 94. Ever played any of those like NHL games? I'll be honest, a lot of those like sports games tend to blur together over time, but I also get it. Dion Pocket says Hades. I've never played Hades. It's very good. It's very, very good. Fair enough. That's why we have two people on this show. All right. That's enough about video games for now. We could make this an entire video games podcast. Yeah. And since, we are streaming on Twitch, maybe that's something we should do. We should just like just play video games while we talk about this crap.
Not a bad idea.
If we could play an actual multiplayer game that isn't Fortnite, and that's what we should call the stream, the not Fortnite stream.
Yeah.
But aside from that, we're gonna jump into this. We're gonna start with one of your takes that grinds your gears. You on Twitter at UberHansen said, "Wins are a quarterback stat is a narrative that grinds your gears." Talk to me about this.
Yeah, I mean, it just isn't a quarterback stat. I always bring up the Browns game against the Bills in, I can't even remember the year.
2009.
The 6-3 game. Derek Anderson went 2 for 17 that game, and the Browns won. So he gets a win on his record because he went 2 for 17 and the Browns won that game. Yet I've watched Josh Allen go off in the playoffs for 400 yards, 4 TDs, and lose the game. So I just can't accept that wins are a quarterback stat, while I will admit that quarterbacks tend to play a larger role in the outcome of most games. Not all games, but in the outcome of most games, a quarterback tends to play a heavy role. But wins just, you cannot define a quarterback by wins. And I think Josh Allen is the perfect example of that, because more often than not in the playoffs, it's him putting the team on his back and no one else showing up for him. So wins or quarterback stat is something that'll always drive me crazy.
Yeah, I really find it irritating when that this is something that we still have to talk about in, current year. It just doesn't. We are so much more aware of what goes into a football game nowadays than I think we were in the past, and we have better ways of evaluating the game. We have better people evaluating the game. We have all these different things that are available to us to show things like wins or a quarterback stat are just really stupid, dumb narratives that we don't have to keep peddling, and yet we still have people trying to push this as a thing. Now, this is not to say that, good quarterbacks, it doesn't matter if they win or not. Of course it matters if you win. But it's not the only thing that you can take, and it's not the only thing that you should be using, or even a primary source of evidence to say that this quarterback is good and this quarterback is bad. It just does not make any sense to me. And when you look at, as Dion Puckins says, it's a weird narrative for a team sport. It's a weird narrative for, we talk, you look in baseball, we talk about pitchers who have their record is a major part of how people perceive them. I don't know if it's really the same in basketball or in hockey. Maybe it is with goalies in hockey versus, I don't know if there's really anything you can use in basketball, but in any sort of scenario, it just does not make sense. And you can maybe make the argument that more now than in the past, quarterbacks are more relevant to your potential to win a game because it's a passing league. That's fine. That's still different than wins are a quarterback stat. That's just that there are different levels to this. And I agree that just some quarterbacks just get put into really bad situations. You have other quarterbacks who get carried into great situations. People always talk about you can win a Super Bowl with this quarterback because look how the Bucks and the Ravens did it in the 2000s, and it's you taking two top 5, maybe 10 defenses in the history of the NFL and using that as your example as this is the bare minimum that you use to get quarterbacks to win is asinine. It does not make any sense. But you do need to be able to have a quarterback that can win, that can win on his own, and there's not a ton of quarterbacks that can do that, but there are enough of them, and there are more of them now than there used to be. Right? There's just way more good, reasonable Super Bowl caliber winning type of quarterbacks now than there are in years past.
Yeah, and I think that whenever I tier quarterbacks, which will be probably a different show at some point if the summer becomes a real lull, I think the tiering is so important. And I love you win because of, you can win with, you win in spite of, like things like that. I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think you win because of, and yet your team success isn't as great as other quarterbacks that are in a lesser tier. I had a guy say to me on Twitter today, and that was the end of the conversation with him. It was a quick mute after that Brock Purdy deserves to be considered better than Josh Allen because Brock Purdy's made a Super Bowl. So that was the end of that conversation because there's no reason to talk to somebody.
I'm going to have our producer just very quickly look up Brock Purdy's stats for the Super Bowl that he played in. He was 23 of 38 for 255 yards, 1 touchdown, no turnovers. That is a perfectly reasonable game. And if Josh Allen were in that position, that's not what that stat line would look like. It's not even close.
Yeah.
He might be 23 of 38. Maybe. He would probably have another 150 yards and more touchdowns. Yeah. Just saying. That's so stupid. God. I'm glad I didn't see that. That would have set me off today, and I didn't need that today. All right. So another one that grinds your gears, because you mentioned this on Twitter as well. Rushing stats don't matter for quarterbacks. And I'm not even gonna let you talk to start. I'm gonna talk on this one because this is another evolution of modern day quarterbacking where you could argue it started with Michael Vick. In reality, it became more of a mainstream thing with Cam Newton because he was the one who could show it wasn't just about speed. It's that you could bring power as a quarterback as well and durability, for the most part. But the modern NFL game requires you to be at least somewhat mobile as a quarterback. You don't have to be some Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson type of athlete or anything like that. Kyler Murray, you don't have to be that type of player. However, even guys like Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, those guys are capable of moving around in the pocket. They're capable of moving outside of the pocket. And if they had to, they could run and whatnot, but that's not their game. CJ Stroud can run, but he chooses not to because he just wants to, set it and rip it from the pocket. And that's fine. That's a play style thing. But I think that not only do rushing stats matter for quarterbacks in the modern NFL, I think just being able to run the ball as a quarterback raises your floor as a quarterback than just about anything else. Because at least with that, I can sort of formulate some style of offense around you. And even if it's not necessarily something amazing or something that's going to be consistently winning games throughout a 17-game season, if you're, let's say, a backup quarterback, and I know that you can run and run well, I'm going to have something installed for you in those weeks, maybe 1 or 2 weeks, that you need to be in there filling in for our starter.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with everything you just said. And I think Joe Burrow was a good example of this season when he was dealing with that calf injury. He was struggling so much from the pocket because he had no mobility, and that lack of mobility really messed with his game. It's not to say that he's this crazy good rushing quarterback, but he leverages that mobility. And when it comes to rushing stats for quarterbacks, it'll never not blow my mind that we just somehow just pretend like rushing touchdowns don't matter at all for them. Like Josh has 15 rushing touchdowns this year, and people are like, no, he only had 29 touchdowns. He only had 29. He had 44 touchdowns this year. He's had 40 touchdowns in 4 straight seasons. And if you look at the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now, you look at a Josh Allen, you look at a Patrick Mahomes, you look at a Lamar Jackson, they're all mobile. Like, people forget that Patrick Mahomes is incredibly mobile and tends to pick up first downs with his legs all the time. All of this matters. We're gone are the days of the Eli Mannings and the Peyton Mannings and those types of players just dominating from the pocket. Eli never dominated from the pocket. Sorry to bring his name up. we're at a different point, and statistically it keeps trending upwards. Quarterbacks, a higher percentage of their yards are rushing, a higher percentage of their touchdowns are rushing, instead of the days when you had a Michael Vick, when you had a Steve McNair, when you had a Randall Cunningham. Those were one in a bunch of pocket passers. Those were the rare guys. Now they're the rule, not the exception. I just can't get over the idea that people, yet again, pretend that rushing stats don't matter for quarterbacks. Well,
it really is just like you look at the way in which just looking at fantasy, right? If you're somebody who thinks that like that rushing stats don't matter for a quarterback, then they shouldn't be taken high in fantasy. Like
True.
I don't like bringing up fantasy as like a comparison to actual football, but there's a reason why those quarterbacks are taken high, and it's because they bring value in that way as a runner. As Keon's jacket jockey says here, quarterback rushing touchdowns are worth 6 points, same as if they throw. Yeah. And you can argue that there's some quarterbacks that are, maybe not as good passers as they are rushers or whatever. That part doesn't really matter. The point is that you're a good quarterback, and part of being a good quarterback nowadays is whether or not you can move. Now, if you're not that mobile, that's fine if you can win at a high level from the pocket outside of that. Because if you can't, and if you're just a statue that's, okay, like, sorry, but the days of Vinny Testaverde are over. Like, that's just, you're not going to be that guy anymore in today's NFL. We're going to move on. We're taking this from Reddit. This is user master _ parsnip. Ring culture in the NFL. So I'm going to assume that this is just talking about how, like, people think Super Bowl is the only thing that actually matters.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. So that's fair. Right. Like, I understand and we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago, where, even if this current iteration and run for the Buffalo Bills does not end in a Super Bowl, it's going to suck that that's the case, because we know how good this team is and we know how great this quarterback is. But that should not preclude us from being able to enjoy the success that they are having right now.
Yeah, I'm all on the idea of, like, if you truly believe that the only thing that matters is winning a Super Bowl, if that's your choice, if that's what you say and you believe, that's fine. But then you can never celebrate a single moment outside of that culmination when you do win the Super Bowl. You can't celebrate a touchdown. You can't celebrate a single win. You can't celebrate making the playoffs. You can't do any of that. And that just
act like you've been there.
Yeah. Ring culture. Like, I would love it if the Bills won a Super Bowl. I'm still going to enjoy watching Josh and this Bills team every single week.
Doing trivia last week reminded me of how long and how terrible that drought era was. And looking at, like, the 2001 NFL draft for the Bills was really great because they got Nate Clements, they got Aaron Schobel, they got Travis Henry, and I'm like, wow, what a surprisingly good draft to get all three of these players with your first 3 picks. How bad were the rest of their drafts around this, where they did nothing with this haul? And it was pretty bad. And that whole era was bad because of just consistently bad drafting, bad free agency. It was everything. Everything kind of came together to create this bad losing culture that nobody wanted to go to, that people were actively trying to get their way out of. And now you look at where the Bills are now, the Bills are a place that people want to go. And it's not because suddenly the weather changed and now the earth had tilted its axis ever so slightly to where it's more pleasant in Buffalo year round. No, it's because there's an actual coach here that people want to play for. There's a system in place that is stable, a general manager who knows what he's doing, and a quarterback that people want to play for. That's different. That is so much different than what we're used to experiencing. I agree it's maybe more stressful now because there's expectations and we want to win and we know that there is an actual opportunity to win a Super Bowl, and it's an elusive thing and we all want to get it at some point, but you know, even if that doesn't happen, enjoy what this era is, because it's fun and it's a game and it should be fun. Listen, I love the 1 o'clock start times of Buffalo year past, right? You get the bad stuff out of the way early. You have the rest of the day to enjoy some like actual good football teams. And then you can go to sleep and think about how next week, maybe it'll just be a little different, you know? And maybe there's something to that routine that people miss. Maybe it's just low expectations and being able to enjoy the badness of a team with the people around you. But also, you could still enjoy your team when they're successful. In fact, you should enjoy your team when they're successful more than when they're not. You should be able to come together with your fellow fans and enjoy how good this team is, instead of stressing about, well, if they win this game, if they don't win this game, if they win the division, they can do that. It's just just relax, just enjoy this team for what it is.
Yeah, as Cover One's resident boomer, I've gone through many eras of my perception of the way I deal with this Buffalo Bills team, and I think when you brought up a lack of stress from the times of Yesterbills, when they just wouldn't win, I'd wake up and read the box score and be like, shoot, I guess they didn't win again. And I'd go to school and get razzed by my buddies. Then it got to a point where they were close. And all of a sudden, every single game, I'd get so mad because I was like, it's been 17 freaking years and they're going to get rolled by the Saints with Nathan Peterman at quarterback. Like, I think that was Tyrod's. I don't remember how those games went. I think that was Tyrod's game. Anyway, I would lose my mind. And then when Josh Allen came, I was still in that mentality. And now in the past few years, I've gotten to a point where I just take a deep breath after a loss. I'm like, okay, well, there's always next week or next year, because as long as 17's there, I think it makes it much easier to not really stress too hard, because I think we have a chance with him.
Yeah, exactly. As Ashley Thompson says here, we win a lot of games and winning is fun. If you think winning a Super Bowl is the only important thing, then you're in for a bad time, in my opinion. And I would generally agree with that. Steve Noble says the Bills are now a benchmark in the league, and yet we are not satisfied. And, you know, for the Bills' perspective, right, if you're somebody a part of that organization, that should be something that is true for you. You should not necessarily be satisfied with that. But we're not professional football players, coaches, executives, scouts, etc. We're just a couple of guys talking about our favorite football team. And we don't need to necessarily pretend that it's anything other than that. Like, just enjoy being able to watch. No, listen. Nobody's forcing you to watch the Bills. Nobody's forcing you to be a fan of the Buffalo Bills. If you want to be a bandwagoner, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. Society will tell you there's something wrong with that. And maybe I'll join in on that in certain days. But at the end of the day, it's a much easier way to enjoy sports. That's for sure. Like, nothing wrong with that. You don't have to watch the Bills if they stress you out this much. Go watch some other teams. Go be a fan of some team making a Super Bowl run. You'll enjoy life a lot more if the Bills are causing you this much stress. Steve Noble also has some great advice from the top of the show. Smash the like button on the way in, peeps. I agree with that. If you are here right now, go ahead and hit that like button, share it with some people. We're here to have a good time and have some other people on here. All right, so this is our next take that grinds our gears. This is from Reddit as well. This is user Clint Grease. Everything that happened before the merger doesn't matter. And then in parentheses, the Bills have 2 championships. So, this is actually really interesting. I'm gonna let you talk, but but this is interesting.
I'm generally the reason I put this one in the sheet, and when I first saw this one, I didn't think this was something that would get brought up. The fact that the merger happened in 1970, and we just discount literally everything that happened before that. We basically pretend like it doesn't happen. It's not a part of your team record, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Yet when we talk about leagues like the MLB, we bring up Babe Ruth. When we talk about leagues like the NBA, we talk about an era prior to the three-point shot. We do this in every single sport, but in the NFL, there's a clear demarcation between when we talk about what is the NFL or what constitutes professional football and when it doesn't. I don't know where I stand on this one. It doesn't necessarily irk me that we just disregard everything that happened in like the Joe Ferguson era for the Bills. What does irk me and what does grind my gears is that the Bills' 2 championships are relatively close to the Jets' single championship, and yet Jets fans pretend like that happened yesterday, and Bills fans cannot talk about their 2 championships. So yeah, I don't know where I stand here. I'm interested in your take on this.
Well, so one of the reasons that this is really interesting is because of one thing that the MLB has done recently, which is to add the Negro League statistics officially to MLB record books, which is very, very interesting. And I'm sure that that's been a topic of debate with among baseball fans. And I think that it's an interesting debate. At the end of the day, it makes sense to add those sorts of things. But also, when you start to open up that part of it, and you then apply it to football, let's say, and you had the NFL before the merger along with the AFL. Obviously, the AFL was a historical league that did a lot of great things and kind of took football in a different direction, right? Because the AFL was a bit more willing to throw the football more as opposed to the NFL teams. And merging those 2 leagues together meant that you were going to be able to get a mix of everything. You had somebody like Joe Namath, who was willing to throw the ball a lot and was going to try and push the ball downfield, which a lot of teams weren't doing, and he was going to end up playing against like a Don Shula type team that wanted to run the ball more, or a Vince Lombardi team that basically did nothing but run the ball. Not exactly, that's not entirely true, but you understand my point. So I understand kind of resetting the records once you make the merger happen. But is there a certain point, and obviously baseball's professional records go back further than football, but maybe this is just a time thing, and is there a certain amount of time that needs to pass before this gets into a point of discussion for the NFL as well? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Yeah, I do think like one interesting thing on this topic is, and I always forget this, there is no NFL Hall of Fame. That's not a thing. It's the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Sure.
So whenever we talk about who's a Hall of Famer, that does include pre-merger players. I saw somebody brought up Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe clearly was before the merger, playing in the 1920s. So he's still in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Obviously, there, like I said, no NFL Hall of Fame. It's an interesting topic, not one I thought I would ever really talk about on a podcast, but I don't know. I just one to kind of consider, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely something that it's an interesting topic, and especially with how MLB decided to change things recently, this may be something that gets brought up at some point. Maybe not in the recent future, but probably sometime down the line. And it'll be interesting to see how that's handled. All right, moving on. We have another Reddit take from you, Czar, 7404. You have to run the ball to be effective. So this is interesting. So I think we are in an interesting place when it comes to this particular take, because on the one hand, for the last, let's say 15-ish years, there's been a major effort and success in turning the NFL into a passing league. The NFL got a lot of good quarterbacks, guys like Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers. You still had the Mannings in play. You had just a lot of different quarterbacks that were around in that time. Drew Brees, another guy. Like, there were a lot of really great quarterbacks, and the NFL saw how exciting it was to have quarterbacks that could throw for 4,000 yards every single season and, push for 5,000 yards, if not consistently make 5,000 yards like guys like Stafford and Breeze would often do. So they start changing the rules to make passing a bit more easier. Defenses respond by making defenses lighter and gearing their defensive personnel to try and play the pass a bit more. And now we're entering an era where NFL offenses are sitting here and looking at lighter defenses that are playing too high safeties. And they're saying, oh, well, what if we just run the ball? Well, if we just go back to running the ball? And the Bills right now are one of those teams that are sort of committing themselves to being more effective running the football. Now, I think what this particular user is trying to say that you have to run the football to be effective. So are they saying effective on offense or effective at like play action?
I think they just, they're from what I remember from their full comment was they were essentially saying like, in order for your offense to be successful, you need to be able to establish the run. So you have to have an effective run game in order to have an effective offense.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that at least for a single season, you can find a way to be successful in the passing game and you don't have to run the football in an effective way. And also our perception of like what is effective when it comes to the ground game is probably a little bit warped. It doesn't necessarily need to be one guy running for 125 yards every single week or anything like that. It can just be a dual-headed threat that maybe one guy runs for 100 yards one week, another guy runs for 85, and the other guy runs for 50 or something like that. Like, you don't necessarily need to be super dominant in every single phase of the game in order to be effective as a team. What you do need to do is be effective when you need to be effective in those phases of the game. When you need to be able to run the ball, especially late in games when you're trying to ice away a lead that you presumably have, you gotta be able to do that. If you can't do that, then it puts a lot of stress on your passing game to not just go out and win the game for all 60 minutes, but also it constrains the passing game by forcing things more towards the middle where it's a lot more crowded, and that's not as easy of a thing to do as opposed to hitting throws to the sideline, because you don't necessarily want to be near the sideline because then you can get forced out and then you're stopping the clock even though you're picking up yards, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the one thing that this made me think of was, surprisingly, the Kansas City Chiefs, and looking into them and their rushing statistics specifically in the playoffs. And they've been a pretty dominant rush offense in the playoffs. I mean, this year they only had one game below 100 yards rushing in the playoffs. Last year, they also only had one. They usually are right up around 130, a little bit over that for the most part. And in all their Super Bowl runs, it's the same thing, where the Bills prior to this year had a problem running the ball in the playoffs. It was essentially Josh Allen and his rushing yards, and then maybe Devin Singletary might chip in 30 at points. The Chiefs kind of balanced their offense a little better, and this year we saw a much more balanced offense from the Bills, almost to an extent like there was too much rushing yards and not enough passing yards. But I think that your point that you need to be able to rush when you need to rush, whether that's short yardage, whether that's running down the clock at the end of the game, or even at the end of the half to set yourself up for a double dip or prevent them from a possible double dip. I think that that's more important. I don't think you necessarily need to put up 100 yards a game, but you need to have the at least threat, let's say, of the ability to run. And sometimes, going back to an earlier grind your gear, that means the quarterback. If the quarterback's a threat to run, it makes 100%. It much more effective.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is if you want to be able to do that, like, come on, like that has to be part of the equation here. It's just that's reality. Like when you look at the 2019 Ravens, that is one of the most successful rushing attacks in NFL history, and a large part of it is because of the league MVP was able to run for 1,000 yards that year. Like that's a big part of it. That's just a lot of these sort of narratives that we're going to be talking about are just sort of the things that we've heard for many years. It's stuff that we've heard growing up, and there might be nuggets of truth in there at times, or maybe there were in the past. At this point, you gotta be able to see the game for what it is right now. And it's always going to keep evolving, and maybe some of those old ideas and adages come back around the corner again, but that doesn't mean that they're always going to be there and relevant right now. And you just have to be able to see what's in front of you right now and evaluate it for what it is. We'll get some comments here because it's been a little bit. RJ says, this is going back to merger discussion. I feel like when the merger happened, it really became a new league. Basically, once the Super Bowl was invented, that was the start of the current league. Basically, yeah. Biggie Scooby, the Canton Bulldogs are still my favorite team. Jim Thorpe is the goat. Yeah, man. I can't take that seriously. That's just, I couldn't have even told you that. So, hold on. Are the Canton Bulldogs an actual team? Were they an actual team?
My knowledge of 1920s football is lacking, I would have to admit. It is quite possible that Jim Thorpe was on the
Yes, they were. They were, the Canton Bulldogs were a professional American football team from 1903. Okay. So, okay. They played in the Ohio League from 1903 to 1906 and 1911 to 1919. And then the American Pro Football Association from 20 to 23 and again from 25 to 26. So there you go. Go Bulldogs. RJ also says the AFL was a significantly more entertaining product. The traditional NFL teams were a run-pass ratio of 90 to 10. Man, there is part of me that kind of wants to look at like historical data for stuff like that and see just how different those sorts of teams were from back then to now.
That'll be the Chargers this year, by the way, right there.
Buy Blake Corum shares now is what we're saying. Let's see. Boogie Scooby also says Norm Van Brocken's 554 yards passing in 1951s is still the most passing yards in a single game. Van Brocklin would throw for 1,000 yards a game in today's NFL. It's so weird seeing like those like one outlier type of players from that long ago. They're just like, he threw for 500 yards like 75 years ago when people were like barely able to throw a football. Like it's the same thing with Sammy Baugh. I remember back in what is this, 2010, when the NFL Network put together like the very first like NFL Top 100. Listen, it was just historical players. It was not like what they do now, like top 100 players of 2024 or whatever. It was like historical players at that time. And they had Bill Belichick talk about Sammy Baugh. And he was like, yeah, Sammy, hold on, wait, I gotta get closer for this. So Sammy was sort of like if you took Tom Brady and Brian Moorman and Ed Reed and put them all together in one player. And that's what you got with Sammy. Which, for the record, is probably accurate, right? Like,
phenomenal impersonation. Oh my god.
I wish I had a hoodie on. I would have gotten the hoodie up, but yeah, that would have been the whole thing. Yeah, it's so funny seeing those sort of like one-of-one players from back then, right? Because like you can look at like a Bart Starr and be like, he was a good quarterback for that time. Or you can say like Jim Thorpe or Jim Brown was not necessarily like a revolutionary player in that he changed how the game was played. He was just the best, right? Like he was just that type of player. He was just a phenomenal player for what he was. That's different than a Sammy Baugh, a Norm Van Brocklin, a John Mackey, Kellen Winslow type of player. Yeah, it's different, and it's fun to be able to look into the past and be like, how the heck did this happen? How is this something that happened? Or like Dick Night Train Lane getting 14 interceptions in a single season when he was a rookie. Like, it's one of the most insane, and that's one of those things where it's like, yes, theoretically someone could do that, but the likelihood of another player getting 14 interceptions, much less as a rookie, is basically impossible at this point in the NFL. It would be one of the greatest seasons in NFL history if that ever happened.
And they still wouldn't win MVP, by the way.
And they still wouldn't win MVP. They'd be like, we might give you Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe. Who had the most sacks this year, though? We'll give it to them. Yeah, it's just fun being able to look at stuff like that. All right, moving on. This is from user Aaron Frogers 8. Bill Belichick is the GOAT. Parentheses, he's 83 and 101 without Tom Brady as his quarterback. Okay, so this is a narrative that grinds this particular user's gears, which means he does not think that Bill Belichick is the GOAT. Okay, so first of all, do you agree with this? Yes or no? We'll start there.
Belichick's my GOAT.
Yeah.
Although I will say Andy Reid is getting awfully close.
Andy Reid is definitely creeping up there.
Yeah.
Because like you can look at this particular run that he has with the Chiefs and be like, okay, this is a Hall of Fame resume just on its own.
Yeah.
And when you add in the stuff that he did in Philadelphia, even if that run in Philadelphia was not successful in terms of winning a Super Bowl, they were in a bunch of NFC Championship games. They were one of the most consistent teams in a very tough division. For those of you who look at the NFC East now and sort of see like, oh, they're that like team, they're that division that only gets primetime games because they're, Northeast big market teams. That's true now. Back in the 2000s, that was not the case. Those were some of the best teams in the NFL. Tom Coughlin with Eli Manning, Romo with Wade Phillips and Jason Garrett. Even if those teams weren't like tip of the top all the time, they were still competitive and still pretty good teams year in and year out. And the Eagles with Andy Reid were right there with them, right? Like they were really, really good teams. And you add that along with what he's done with the Chiefs over the 2010s is a run unlike anyone else. And it's not just the fact that he's successful. It's the fact that he's one of, I think right now, is he the oldest coach in the NFL? The oldest head coach in the NFL?
He's got to be close. I'm not sure.
Now that Belichick is the one.
And Pete Carroll's out, too.
And Pete Carroll is out. Who is the oldest NFL coach right now? It is Andy Reid. Yeah, interesting. So he's the oldest coach right now. He is 65 years old. John Harbaugh is the next oldest at 61. And even at his age, him being older than everybody else in the league, he is still so far ahead of everyone else when it comes to offense in the NFL.
It's crazy.
He is doing stuff that is constantly changing. He is never do. He's still Andy Reid. He's still doing like some of the basic ideas of West Coast. But if you go back, and you can go back, because there are games that are on YouTube where you can watch Andy Reid's time in Philadelphia with the Eagles when he had Donovan McNabb and Brian Westbrook and all those great players that the Eagles had. Those teams and those offenses were way different than what the Chiefs are doing now, and that's what great coaches do. And when you look at Andy Reid and compare him to someone like Bill Belichick, right? Like, Bill Belichick was somebody who took defense in the 2000s, and really, actually, we can go back to the 1990s, where him and Nick Saban developed pattern matching coverages, which totally changed how people were able to utilize coverage on the back end to actually match what was happening in front of them in the game instead of just being like, well, we can play man-to-man or we can spot drop into zone. And it's like, you can still do that in today's NFL. Sean McDermott's defenses do plenty of spot drop. But that in itself also includes, what did I just say? Pattern matching. I'm totally with it. I'm definitely 100% here right now. Like that's part of it. And so Bill Belichick helped revolutionize things in the 90s. He took that and made it great in New England. And we could talk about their record or Bill Belichick's record without Tom Brady as his quarterback. But let's be real. Those first 3 Super Bowls were won because Bill Belichick's defenses were elite defenses. Tom Brady had great moments in those Super Bowls, particularly on getting game-winning drives against the Rams and the Panthers in 2001 and 2003. But those defenses were what got them there in the first place. And in that Rams Super Bowl, right? Like, Ty Law had a pick 6 in the Super Bowl. Like, that doesn't happen very often. And especially in a very close-scoring game like that, that's a pretty big thing. And especially against the quote-unquote greatest show on turf. I literally have that book right here in front of me. Like, it's right here. That is one of the greatest offenses of all time. And couple that against the best, one of the best defenses that was put together that season with one of the best defensive coaches. Yeah, it's no wonder they won that Super Bowl. And as Biggie Scooby says, plus the greatest kicker of all time, Adam Vinatieri, big part of that. That is a big part of that, especially when you're playing a lot more close games. And the other part of this is that they won 3 Super Bowls largely because of their defense in the early 2000s. Then they changed. They changed the identity of their team to where Josh McDaniels was able to say, hey, we can integrate spread offensive concepts into our football team and be like actually successful. Because like Brady can do this and we can bring in this guy. He's a short little white guy. His name's Wes Welker. We can trade for Randy Moss. He basically costs nothing. Like, Bill, you still think that guy can run, right? Yeah, I could totally think that guy, he can definitely run. And they put together one of the best offenses in the history of the NFL. And they changed how they won games. And that sort of idea and how they decided they were going to win games carried over for the next decade or so, where they focused a lot more on offense. They still had really good defenses at times. You look into the 2018 team, right? That went against ironically, the Rams again in the Super Bowl. And that defense absolutely smothered one of the best offenses in the NFL. Granted, Jared Goff and Sean McVay kind of pooped their pants had their deer in the headlight moments, and Todd Gurley was hurt. I get all that, but also that was a great defense and not necessarily like the best Patriots offense, and that Patriots offense kind of got stalled out by a really good Rams defense as well. And when you look at the like 2014 Patriots with when they had Darrelle Revis, like that was a really good, well-rounded team. Again, like being able to win and win consistently and win multiple Super Bowls across multiple decades.
Yeah.
In different styles and fashions, that's not just because of Tom Brady. Like, that's a combination of all these different things. Now, I understand that Bill Belichick is kind of the cause of his own demise because of how he decided that he was just gonna basically not care about offense, but that's its own separate criticism. That in itself should not like immediately preclude him from GOAT conversations when we're talking about the best coaches in NFL history.
Yeah, I think so much of this is recency bias too. People just forget how dominant Bill Belichick's defense was in particular because they're like, well, when Tom Brady left, he won a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. Why couldn't Bill Belichick do that with his team? Well, it's because he had Mac Jones and Cam Newton, which to an extent was also his fault because he was the one making the decisions on what quarterbacks to bring in. But when you have such subpar quarterback play, you're going to really, really have a difficult time competing at a high level. And to that end, he brought that Mac Jones team to the playoffs and actually was right there with the Bills till the end of that season in winning that division title. He got more out of those teams than people are willing to admit because he was so good at dialing up those defenses. They just had no offensive identity. I still have him as the GOAT. I will only move off that, I think, if Andy Reid wins the Super Bowl this year. It would be really difficult for me not to start.
If the Chiefs three-peat, that's hard to go against. That's just how it is.
He still would only. It's crazy. He'd still only have 4 Super Bowls to Belichick's 6. But at that point, because he's done it with 2 teams and such a diverse set of quarterbacks, you start to say, well, the better way to say it, I think, is Andy Reid's the greatest offensive head coach of all time. Bill Belichick's the greatest defensive head coach of all. If you imagine those 2 on the same, oh my God, that would be nuts.
Oh man, be wild. Be kind of fun to see.
Very different personalities.
Yeah. All right, moving on to our next take. This is from our fellow Cover One colleague at Low Buffa or Chris Seth on Twitter. PFF grades. That's it. That's all I want. That's what grinds his gears. And you know what? I'm with him. Whenever people use PFF grades to talk about a player, I am immediately skeptical of what you are bringing to this conversation because I'm assuming it's not very much. Now, this is not to say that I haven't used PFF grades in my own analysis or whatever, but it's more a piece of a puzzle. It's not like, oh, PFF has him graded as this, therefore he's not very good. And PFF knows what they're doing because they pay a bunch of people to do this. It's like, okay. Steve, you're coming in clutch. You're coming in clutch right now. PFF and the Dotson effect. So let's talk about this. Tyrell Dotson was PFF's, remind me again, Uber, how high was he in terms of linebacker grades?
Was he number 1? I can't remember now.
I'm like 99% sure he was their number 1 graded linebacker in the year of our Lord 2023.
89.5.
89.5. Now here's the thing. Some of the PFF talking heads, your, Sam Monson's, Steve Palazzolo's, those sorts of guys, They'll go on Twitter and they'll defend their grading system, and I get that. I understand that's what they're supposed to do. I get that. And even they, when talking about Tyrell Dotson, were like, well, this is something that is certainly affected by a smaller sample size compared to other players, blah, blah, blah. And that's a fair thing to bring up, and that's a reasonable thing to say when you're talking about context around their grading system, right? And that's important. That being said, even if you are taking a small sample size and saying that, or whatever, there's no way you should have a system in place for your grades, subjective or not, that has Tyrell Dotson as a better linebacker than everyone else in the NFL. That does not make any sense to me whatsoever. And especially when he is the 3rd best linebacker on his own team. Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, I think, are very easily better linebackers than both of them. And I don't think that's a discussion we need to have.
No, not
and
at all.
Tyrell Dotson had a good year last year. He did. Like, I'm not trying to take that away from him, and he got paid. Good for him. And he's gonna go to another really great head coach in Mike McDonald in Seattle, and he might have another good year. Which, good for him if he does. I'm not rooting against him, but like, what are we talking about, man? Like, this whole idea of using PFF grades is really, really bizarre to me that people really take this and they don't even really question it. They just sort of say like, oh well, NFL uses PFF, like they have all these people that they pay. Which, for the record, saying PFF pays people to watch grades or to watch the players and grade them, is being very generous to both the word pay and PFF. So let's get that out. Let's get that cat out of the bag. RJ says PFF grades and just a bunch of puking emojis, and I kind of agree with that. Nikki G says only PFF rankings that matter is Josh Allen at number 1. And the Bills have 3 of the top 13 cornerbacks that everyone seems to neglect. And like, yeah, it's just there's a weird inconsistency in grading where I just don't really get it, and they change the grades throughout the week based on, you know, corrections, and it's like, why are these going out without being reviewed? Like
they change it based on vibes is what they do. I
honestly
believe that.
Basically, you could I believe that because they will get pushback on certain things that, and you know, you could call it vibes, but you can just call it like we're using the public to kind of draw attention to something that maybe we missed or maybe we didn't, and we're just going to double down on it because who cares? Like nobody can really, like, people can question us, but they don't know the process, so we're just going to stick behind the process and we're going to say that we're better because we're PFF, and you know, Chris Collinsworth is our daddy. So yeah.
I was trying to. This reminded me of last summer. I think it was in the preseason. Osiris Torrance played a nearly flawless game, and he had a lower rating than like I don't remember who, somebody else on the team that shouldn't have. And Bills fans, and I think even Eric from Cover One was like, "This is ridiculous. Like this has to be corrected." And they're like, just, "Oh, our bad. Like we messed up." And then they just like added 10 points to his total.
Right.
I also did. I'm going to read real quick a tweet that you get if you just follow PFF ratings. And this particular user said that he used a combo of stats and PFF grades to come up with this. And he was recapping how the Bills were last year and how good the players on the team were. And this is what he had to say. Deion Dawkins was mediocre last year. Okay. James Cook is a running back, which doesn't move the needle. Dalton Kincaid is a bottom 5 top receiving option. Terrell Bernard was terrible. Ed Oliver was below average. Matt Milano was average. Teron Johnson was quite good last year. So, yeah, that's what we have from when we follow PFF grades. So do not follow PFF grades.
There's plenty of stuff. I mean, we at Cover One use PFF for different things. Suffice to say, we don't use it for their grading system. That's not why we use PFF. And there's other places that are really good, like analytically based analysis. Sewer Sports, that was put together by Eric Eager, who is now with the Carolina Panthers, which is a crazy thing to think about, mostly because he blocked me on Twitter for some unknown reason, even though I've never interacted with him directly. And, you know, places like SIS, which, again, we here at Cover One use SIS a lot for what we put out. There's plenty of places where you can get, like, stats and analytically based content and analysis. You don't have to rely on PFF just because they were the first and most prominent to do it, right? Like, you don't have to be a slave to PFF system. Yeah, open your third analytic eye, so to speak. All right, we're gonna move on. We had a couple that we're just gonna skip over. They're about injuries and, you know, whatever. Not to say that it doesn't matter, or that we're ungrateful to those who submitted those, but you know, there's other stuff we could talk about. So we're getting to a new topic. So that first group of takes was just sort of NFL takes. It was kind of all over the board. This is Sean McDermott, and this is worth talking about because Sean McDermott is a hot point of contention among Bills fans, and a lot of people. Yeah, I'm not even sure if it is. Is it a lot of people? Is it a lot of people that don't like Sean McDermott, or is it just the same people commenting on every single thing that's Bills related, saying that McDermott is overrated and they'll never win anything with McDermott?
That's a really good question. That's a poll I might do tomorrow. It could just be a vocal minority of people, or I bet you it's like a vocal minority is like, fire him today. And then some people are like, I'm not sold that he can ever do it. And then like, it's probably a spectrum of things. So
yeah, it's rarely quite so easy as just like one group of people says this and one group of people says that, and it's only these two and blah, blah, blah. I think that you are right in that there's people who probably, I would say, if we were to kind of split things down into a bunch of different categories, the biggest category would be people saying McDermott is definitely a good coach who may not be good enough to win a Super Bowl. Yep. I would say most people would probably fit into that category. But there are some other things, regardless of that, that I think are really kind of dumb narratives about Sean McDermott. And apparently so do some other people. So, God, I really don't want to read this particular username, but I'm gonna, because you submitted it, and this is a good thing to talk about. User from Reddit, user u/diarrhea. That's 4 A's at the end. Apparently they had a lot of Taco Bell that day. They say Sean McDermott doesn't play rookies. This is a great thing to talk about because it's a stupid thing to talk about. Because, so, when Sean McDermott was a rookie head coach in 2017, it was clear to pretty much everyone that Ramon Humber was not as good as Matt Milano. After a certain point, people got really annoyed by the fact that Ramon Humber was starting over Matt Milano, who was also a rookie at the time, a 5th-round rookie. And I don't know exactly when it started, but my guess, if I were to go through like in-season press conferences and hearing the Bills beat ask Sean McDermott, why isn't Matt Milano playing? He seems to be, making big plays out there whenever he's out there. Sean McDermott probably said something to the effect of, he's a rookie, we're just bringing him along as he needs to be brought along. Something to that effect. And now people are applying it to any rookie that the Bills have at any point whatsoever. And I think that that's really reductionist reasoning. Because when you look at the very next draft, at Tremaine Edmonds and Josh Allen as their first-round picks, now, would they have liked to not play Josh Allen as a rookie? Yes, I think that was their plan. I don't think they wanted to play Josh Allen as a starter in week 2. But they made the mistake when they only had Nate Peterman as the only other option at quarterback that year, before bringing in Derek Anderson. They backed themselves into that corner. But Tremaine Edmonds started at middle linebacker from week 1 and didn't let go until he left in free agency. You look at, even in that 2017 draft, Trey White was the starting cornerback and was a big reason why they won. Like, you go back to that 2017 year, I could point to probably 4 games that the Bills won because Trey White was one of their starting cornerbacks. That Tampa game where he forced a fumble right before the 2-minute warning. The Kansas City game where he had the game-ending interception. A couple other games that I could. The Atlanta game where he picked up the fumble right before halftime. Right?
The fumble.
That was not a fumble. That was absolutely not a fumble. I was shocked that it was called a fumble on the field. I was even more shocked that they reviewed it and said, yep, it's a fumble. I just can't. I can't. I still can't get over it. That's just ridiculous. But it was like week 6 and the Falcons fans, all 10 of them were just like, we are raging against the sun and whatever. They're mostly pointless franchise. But anyway, we're not here to talk about how pointless the Falcons are. But like, Trey White started as a rookie and was a major part of that season for them. Ed Oliver was part of a defensive line rotation and has been a part of a defensive line rotation throughout his career with the Bills. That's just part of it. Greg Rousseau, again, defensive line rotation. That's how it is. I don't understand this notion that like they don't play rookies. It's just like you hung on to this narrative for a year and then you decided to make it a part of your analysis year in and year out, and it does not make any sense. I don't get why this is still a thing.
Yeah, I don't either. Even like I looked up Dawson Knox because I was like, how much did he start? And he was barely a tight end coming out of college, and he played 64% of the snaps his rookie season, which is a pretty hefty number for a tight end that literally basically never played tight end. But yeah, I think the best part about this whole narrative is that a lot of them had to eat their words this past year when Dalton Kincaid and Osiris Torrance Torrance played every single snap, and Dalton Kincaid was our TE1. But I don't know, like this year, they're going to complain when Ray Davis is RB2. They're going to be like, well, Sean McDermott doesn't play his running backs or play his rookies. Like Ray Davis is RB2. Or if like Cedric Van Pran Granger isn't the starting center, well, why are you starting Connor McGovern? Or Javon Solomon is just a rotational depth defensive end.
Right.
Oh, what are we doing? Why is he not starting over Von Miller? Like it's a weird narrative that I think people got way too hung up on about nothing. And I even think a lot of it stems from Kyer Elam not starting, even though they just forget that Christian Benford did. So it's a stupid narrative that needs to just be cut from the record completely. But some people are holding on like they're Jack on the little raft that Rose wouldn't let him onto in the Titanic,
What a comparison. What a comparison. Our next take about Sean McDermott is from I think I got this. This is from a Reddit user named Tank of D-Wrath, something like that. Y'all get it. Sean McDermott is the only reason the Bills lose to the Chiefs. So Bills and the Chiefs have met a lot over the years in the regular season, but more prominently in the postseason. And the Bills have lost in those games, which is disappointing and it sucks, especially when you also see the Chiefs winning Super Bowls when the Bills are not. Saying that Sean McDermott is the only reason they lose in those games is dumb and kind of takes away from the idea that this is a team game.
Yeah, I think it's just as bad as the quarterbacks are a win stat, maybe a little bit worse. I do think that like there's been some head scratching decisions, which I still don't know if we have.
Like a fake punt with DeMar Hamlin on your own end.
Yeah, man. Well, that wasn't great. That was not great. There's some head scratching decisions by McDermott, but even in this Chiefs game this year, I think there was a point when I was watching it where I was like, I don't know what he's supposed to do because we had no linebackers, like literally no healthy linebackers. And it's like, what's he supposed to do to stop Travis Kelce with no healthy linebackers and aged Micah Hyde?
Well, obviously he's supposed to play the rookie Dorian Williams, but he doesn't play rookies.
Yeah, he doesn't play rookies. Oh my God. Yeah. Sean McDermott has without a doubt not been perfect and not been great in those games either. But the idea that he's the only reason they lose to the Chiefs, like if you get rid of him and you bring in someone else, you're automatically going to beat them. That's something I'll never agree with.
Yeah. It's I understand the frustration with losing to the Chiefs because I'm annoyed with it too. And I hate seeing this team constantly in this position over and over again, but it's not just because Sean McDermott is the head coach. You wouldn't really be in this position to be losing significant games in the playoffs if Sean McDermott was not your head coach or if Josh Allen was not your quarterback. It's not just one thing or the other, right? It is what it is. All right. On a similar note from United _side 6904, Sean McDermott is a bad head coach. So in the, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. That's 7 years as a head coach. Okay? 7 years. Of those 7 years, the Bills have had a winning record in 6 of those seasons. They have won the division in 4 of those seasons. 4 straight seasons. And there's an opportunity for them to make it 5 straight seasons. People may not want to believe that, but it's true. They can make it 5 straight seasons in 2024. And I don't know how you're a bad coach if you can do something like that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And this is a weird stat I just found, so bear with me for a second.
Go ahead.
I was looking at coach stats because I was trying to compare Andy Reid and Bill Belichick. And there's a stat on Pro Football Reference called teams average finish in division. It takes all of them, averages them up, whatever. So Sean McDermott's average finish in division is 1.6. Did you know that there is only 2 coaches in NFL history with more than 100 games that have a better average finish in their division? And do you know who they would be?
So Bill Belichick would have to be one of them.
No.
No?
Bill Belichick's 1.8, as is Andy Reid. Yeah, I don't think you'll guess. I'll just give them to you.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Vince Lombardi
Jeez.
and John Madden. Those are the only 2 that have averaged a better finish in their division than Sean McDermott, which is really odd stat.
That is weird. That's really weird thing to say.
I don't know. I just something I found. Sirianni's right behind Sean McDermott too, by the way.
Interesting. Very interesting. Sal here says, so nobody else could win with Josh Allen. Okay, LOL. That's not what we're saying, actually. It's not at all what we're saying. What we're saying is this team, I mean, they made the playoffs without Josh Allen. They were 9-7. They were a wild card team, and they did that in a year where they shouldn't be winning anything, right? Like that's that they traded away a number of like really good players before the season even started, and yeah, they found a way to back their way into the playoffs. And you could even look at 2018 and him going 6-10 as arguably a better coaching job than getting that 2017 team to 9-7 in the playoffs. Like that 2018 squad was abysmal, but they found 6 wins out of that squad, and they found a way to progress the next year to being a legitimate wild card team that was 10-6. They found a way next year to progress into becoming a Super Bowl contending type of team and winning their division for the first time in a very, very long time. And continue to win the division over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. This is not just because of Josh Allen, and it's not just because of Sean McDermott, and it's not just because of one factor or another. It's the fact that this all comes together, and Sean McDermott is at the head of this ship, and he's the one who's in charge of it. There are other people that contribute to this. There are major factors to this. But Sean McDermott's the one in charge of this, and you can't just, like, conveniently take something away just because you don't think he's a good coach when everything else is telling you he's a good coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also see Sal said McDermott also lost the line room benching. First of all, he should have benched Tyrod for Nathan Peterman just because the results didn't work out the way he wanted them to. Doesn't mean it wasn't the right decision, in my opinion. But just coming back to this most recent year, I don't think people, generally Bills fans, appreciate what Sean McDermott did at the end of the season nearly enough. With their backs against the wall at 6-6, arguably outside the playoff picture, I think some place had them as like a 10% chance of making the playoffs. Yeah. And that defense decimated by injuries, missing still Trey White, Daquan Jones, Matt Milano, and getting hurt and more hurt by the week. He somehow found a way to stop the Kansas City Chiefs, stop the Dallas Cowboys, stop the Miami Dolphins in all five must-win games at the end of the season. Like, he deserves some credit for that. Just because they gave up 27 points to that Chiefs team without a starting linebacker, without Christian Benford, with a banged-up Daquan Jones, with a non-existent Von Miller, just because they gave up 27 points and they couldn't slow down that team doesn't mean you just get to take away everything else before that. And it also doesn't mean I get to take away things like that Denver Broncos game. Like, I'm not taking that away. That was an awful mistake, the 12 men on the field, and that's on Sean McDermott. But I don't think you can just discuss the bad and ignore the good. Like, there's been so much good with this team. Sean McDermott deserves a massive amount of credit for that.
100%. 100% agreed. Let's see. Do we want to do this one? Or
we skip it. We'll skip it.
All right, we'll skip that. We're moving on to other Bills-related topics, and we're gonna go with one that is really annoying to me personally, because it's of how recent it is. This is from Reddit user OKPlastic2992. The Bills, quote, allowed, unquote, Kansas City to draft Xavier Worthy. So, here's the thing. Here's the short version of this. If the Bills wanted to draft Xavier Worthy, they would have done it. If they wanted to take Keon Coleman at that particular position in the first round, they would have done it. They didn't. They ended up trading back twice to pick up some more picks, and they still get the guy that they want, or at least who they say they want. Every team said they got who they want. Right after the draft, they're like, "Oh, we can't believe that guy was still there." It's like, okay, everyone had like a 5th round grade on him, and you got him in the 4th. So let's relax. But there's definitely reason to believe that the Bills were very, very high on Keon Coleman, but felt like they could just drop to 33, 33, and keep that pick and be fine with getting whoever was going to end up there. Because there's a possibility where Keon Coleman maybe doesn't make it there. And, okay, they probably had someone else in mind. Because that's what good NFL teams do. And good NFL GMs do. They don't back themselves into a corner and allow themselves to only have one solution out. You know, there's more than one thing that goes into this. The long version of this is the Chiefs traded up, swapping picks, trading out of the 3rd round, essentially, in order to get Xavier Worthy, who presents a very good skill set and can be a potential game breaker for this offense for the Chiefs, and it's a scary idea. And I'm also pretty sure that Uber just froze on his camera's frozen. His camera's definitely frozen. Otherwise, he's just not blinking, and that's a weird thing. Oh my gosh, we have 2 Ubers. Oh God, that's crazy. Oh, I wanted to keep second Uber, but anyway. So, yeah, we have Xavier Worthy on the Chiefs, and that's a potentially great dynamic for that Chiefs team to have. Also, there's a chance that this doesn't work out. Yeah. Because there's a lot of receivers that get taken in the first round of drafts. They don't always work out.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't. One thing that I believe, and I'll never be able to prove this, and no one will be able to prove me wrong, so I can just keep living this way my entire life and just be right in my own head. But I don't believe that if the Bills wanted Xavier Worthy, they make that trade with the Chiefs without the Chiefs first saying, we're not going to take Xavier Worthy, and the Bills somehow get a guarantee on that. Like, I don't think the Bills are making that trade if that's their guy. I'm fairly confident in my mind that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane knew who the Chiefs were taking. They knew they were taking Xavier Worthy, and they said, fine, we don't want him. Let's get some picks from the Chiefs. I see literally no issue with the Bills making that trade, because at the end of the day, they benefited from it with picks, and they still got their guy from what we believe.
Yeah. And there was someone, I don't necessarily want to call out who, but there was someone in a particularly prominent position in Bills media who basically said that he would have felt better if the Bills had stayed at 28 and taken Keon Coleman there instead of letting the Chiefs trade up to get Xavier Worthy. Even though there's a possibility that the Chiefs could have just had Xavier Worthy at 32 and the Bills wouldn't have gotten picks from the it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Everything about it just sort of says we're so terrified of the Chiefs that we don't even want to acknowledge their existence. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Get over it.
And that's actually a good reason to like this trade more, because to me this is the Bills saying, look, you've had our number in the playoffs 3 times now. We're not scared of you guys. Like, we'll still make moves that we think benefit us instead of moves that we think is a detriment to you. I like that approach better than just being scared of that team.
And not only that, but you get back into the third round, which is something they clearly wanted to do because they didn't have a third round pick, despite the fact that they should have had a third round pick. But the NFL says, screw you, our compensatory rules are changing ever so slightly so that you don't get a third round pick. I'm not bitter about that. And look, they end up not only getting back into the third round, but they get like one of the players that made the most sense for them in the third round, which was Dwayne Carter, who's was one of those players that was like, this makes too much sense for this not to happen. And usually when we say that, it doesn't happen for one reason or another. But this time it did, and it made perfect sense. And it's like, okay, so you get the receiver, or at least a receiver that you wanted. You trade back, you get Cole Bishop in the second round, and you get Dwayne Carter, who fits your team perfectly in the third round. Well, okay, cool. Why is this something that we're talking about? Why is this something that people are upset about? I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I am with you. And I think also like Van Pan Granger is somehow in the 2 trades back for the Bills.
He might be.
Like, what if he ends up being the Bills starting center and the Bills are like, yeah, we got our wide receiver 1 and we got a starting center. Oh, sorry, we traded back, 5 spots for that. Just stupid.
Yeah. All right, moving on to something that is not quite so football related, but something that I definitely have takes about. This is from Slinky Joe 1 on Reddit. Rookies need to like blue cheese. First of all, Uber. This is a safe space.
What are you doing here?
This is a safe space.
Okay.
Ranch or blue cheese when it comes to
blue cheese.
Okay.
I
agree.
love blue cheese.
Yeah. I thoroughly enjoy blue cheese dressing. And look, I'm gonna expose my roommate. My roommate, my old roommate, I should say. Recently just had a kid. Just had his first kid like a couple days ago, like almost 30 hours of labor. Yeah. Not fun for anyone involved in that. But wonderful little girl. But he God bless him. Wonderful guy, hard worker, smart with football, really good person. If there's something that really drives me up the wall, is that he has an obsession with ranch dressing. And when I say obsession, I really genuinely mean obsession. If there's anything that he is eating, it probably has a side of ranch with it.
Okay.
And like, it could be pizza. It could be some like chicken and rice thing that he made himself. When we go out and eat and he orders a steak, he orders it with a side of ranch.
No, dude, no. Okay.
No, he eats steak with ranch dressing. And this is the problem that I have with ranch dressing. I think ranch dressing is fine. I think it's fine. People who like ranch dressing are like cultists about it. They cannot imagine their lives without ranch dressing, and I do not understand why. Now, I will agree here with RJ. Good blue cheese is great. I've never been to either of these places, but I'm sure they have good blue cheese. Cheap blue cheese is really bad. I agree with that. It's a very varying degree of success when it comes to, like, how good it actually is. Because blue cheese in itself is a weird thing to work with. It's stinky, it's funky, it's very salty, sometimes a little bitter. Like, it's a weird thing to work with. It's
got
like
lumps.
It's like cheese is already mold, and blue cheese is like the mold's mold. Like, it's a weird thing. But when it's good, it's really good. And it's a great compliment to the heat that you get from a wing. But we also don't need to force rookies to be like, ranch or blue cheese. It's like, get over it. I'm not here for that.
Yeah, and I'm not. I'm from upstate New York. Like I haven't spent a significant amount of time in the southern part of the United States, but from my understanding, blue cheese just isn't as popular down there, and it tends to be a lot of the players that they're talking to are from the South. They're like, "Do you like ranch or blue cheese?" And for the most part, they're like, "The only blue cheese I've had is like the cheap blue cheese," so they don't like it. They don't have to like blue cheese. I think it's funny at times when they do this stuff. Like when they have them try blue cheese and some of them are like, that's gross, dude. I don't want that anymore. I think that's funny. But this idea that I think there's some fans that are serious about it. And they're like, you have to like blue cheese. And if you do not, then you are not a Buffalo Bill and you'll never be a Buffalo Bill, which drives me crazy. One quick thing to throw out that a buddy of mine had said this to me. He said that Buffalo is not getting nearly enough respect from just the national, like the entire world. And he said, when you order a New York slice of pizza, like you order a pizza from somewhere and it's called like a New York slice or something, they capitalize New York. But when you order Buffalo wings, why is the B lowercase?
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
Just throwing that out there.
Inquiring minds want to know.
A little more respect would be nice.
Peter Wilson says, tossed in buffalo sauce, more buffalo on the side, nothing further necessary beyond that. So I may be in the minority here when it comes to how I eat wings. First of all, yes, tossed in buffalo sauce, that's the right answer. I also don't dip the wing into the blue cheese. I just eat the wing as it's been dressed, and then I take my carrots, because I get carrots because celery tastes like sewage, sort of, to me. That's a COVID thing, not like just a me thing. That's not like a person. That's literally just like something that happened when I had COVID. Is that like afterwards, celery just does not taste great to me. So I get carrots instead. I just eat the blue cheese with the carrots. Some people will be like, that's weird, but whatever. I don't know. I think that's just how I do it. I don't necessarily love dunking a very hot, recently fried wing of chicken into cold blue cheese dressing. I don't like a lot of mixing with my food.
I think I probably do about 50-50, to be honest. Like half my wings I will eat just the wing and the sauce as is, and the other half I'll dip in blue cheese. But I like if it's a really good blue cheese, it can elevate the wing so much to me. But again, that's I also love blue cheese, but that's a whole nother thing.
I enjoy blue cheese a lot. Steve Noble says, in Tennessee, I have to request blue cheese with my wings. Unbelievable. Walter S. says, you don't have to like blue cheese. You're just not a good human being if you don't. That's all. Can't really argue with that, can I? All right. All right. We're running low on time. We're running a little low on time. So we're gonna we could go through all these. We're just gonna go through them quickly. All right. First thing, user. I'm gonna say Dr. Devil's fan. That's what I'm gonna go with. Dr. Devil's fan. Tyler Bass is a bad kicker. I think Tyler Bass had a struggling year last year. That was not up to his usual standards. I'm more inclined to believe that he can bounce back from that than not. And I think some people are a little hasty getting off the Tyler Bass wagon.
Yeah, I think Tyler Bass is still a top 10 kicker in the NFL. I truly believe that. I am concerned about him in clutch moments in the playoffs, just because I wonder if this is now in his head that this happened last year and he's not going to be able to get over that. And the problem is, I won't know if that's true or not until he's in a clutch moment in the playoffs, which is going to be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, and that's how it goes. That's how this game goes, and especially in kicking, where it's very mental. Like the kicking game is very, very mentally based. All right, moving on to our last topic, which is Josh Allen, our lovely man-child quarterback. I'm going to combine these two because they're basically the same thing. Users Dexter_Cantaloupe and Tick Tick Boom with 3 M's says they both say Josh Allen interceptions and Josh Allen as a turnover machine are narratives that grind their gears, and I agree with that. So there is a moment that will live in my brain for the rest of my life, for as long as I watch football. And it actually involved Washington, the football team that resides in Washington.
Okay.
And somebody asked Kirk Cousins about, like, maybe wanting to push the ball down the field more. This is when Kirk Cousins and Jay Gruden were both in Washington. You know, Kirk Cousins was being asked by Jay Gruden to push the ball down the field more and be more aggressive down the field. And Kirk Cousins basically gave, a very reasonable argument and answer about, if Jay wants me to do that, I understand his thought process behind it. I know he wants me to be more aggressive, but if I really did throw the ball down the field and was as aggressive as he wanted me to be, I'd probably throw like 50 interceptions or something like that, which is probably true. And so the next day, somebody asked Jay Gruden about that and told him what Kirk said, and Jay just said, "Yeah, but he'd have like 100 touchdowns." So, which that's we're not that far off from what from what Josh Allen is, except I think the Josh Allen is a turnover machine narrative is really overblown at times.
Yeah, he has a turnover problem. To an extent, I do think he turns the ball over too much, but for the most part, it doesn't really bite this team in the ass at all. And if you look in the playoffs, he just stops turning the ball over completely, basically, which is all that really matters in the Josh Allen career arc. The thing that irks me more or grinds my gears more is that it seems to only apply to Josh Allen. That's the only person we can say this to. And like last year, the difference between him and Tua Tagovailoa when it came to turning the ball over was, as I pull this up, 0.04%. Like that was the turnover rate based on touches to turnovers. But why? Tua is not a turnover machine. Like we're not talking about that. So that's the thing that bothers me. Like treat them all equally. Josh should turn the ball over less, but he more than makes up for it with his crazy amount of touchdowns.
Yeah, it feels like a narrative that has been part of him because of how he played in college and how he was as a rookie, and people are just not quite so willing to give that up, especially because he plays so kind of recklessly and wildly at times that we just sort of assume that that's going to lead to turnovers, and it does sometimes. Mm-hmm. But more often than not, it doesn't. And I think that it just sort of became this. It's become this thing. And I don't think we need to address it and act like he is some sort of turnover machine. All right. User from Reddit rock_city says Stephon Diggs made Josh Allen is a narrative that grinds his gears. So it is. I mean, it's obvious that Josh Allen took a huge leap forward in year 3 once he got Stephon Diggs. And it makes sense. We talk about this being a team game. Stephon Diggs being an alpha number 1 type wide receiver with somebody like Josh Allen in 2020 led to extraordinary results. In case you were not here last week for trivia, one of the questions was, who has which receivers have the top 10 receiving seasons in terms of yards in Bill's history? And Stephon Diggs has all of the top 4. He was here for 4 seasons. He has the 4 best receiving seasons in Bill's history in terms of yards. So he's a big part of it, and he should be. But if you're wondering, like, well, what is Josh Allen going to look like without Stephon Diggs? Well, first of all, you can look at the second half of last year, for most of last year, because Diggs was so inconsistent with Allen. But not only that, like, even somebody like John Brown had a career year when he was in Buffalo in 2019. Like, and that's a receiver who was on a number of different teams and had some good quarterbacks, but his best year came with Josh Allen before Josh Allen became the consensus number 2 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah. I think 2019, like the thing that drives me crazy too about all this is when people talk about 2019 Josh Allen, people outside of the Buffalo Bills, outside of this fandom, they say that Josh Allen was garbage in his sophomore season. He sucked. He stunk. He was awful. Yeah. He had 29 touchdowns and 13 turnovers. And yet, if we look at, say, a Patrick Mahomes this season, in the regular season, he had 27 touchdowns and 17 turnovers. So was Patrick Mahomes garbage this season, or no? We'll just pretend like he wasn't garbage in the regular season. So again, it's the inconsistency in comparing quarterbacks. But that was Josh Allen before he took this gigantic leap into the stratosphere that he is now. I am concerned that the Bills don't have that alpha dude, wide receiver one, like a Stephon Diggs, but this idea that Josh Allen's going to completely fall off a cliff and become rookie Josh Allen again is so wild and completely disrespectful to him.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing, and it also kind of makes me feel like people are discounting what the Bills have on offense as well, whether it's Dalton Kincaid or Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir, or even James Cook, for that matter. Like, Stephon Diggs was not the only player on this team, and Gabe Davis was not the only receiver on this team. Like, they will find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
It may not be the same, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this forces certain changes philosophically on offense. And maybe that'll be a good thing. Maybe it won't. It might not work out. There's more than a reasonable chance that getting rid of Stephon Diggs does not work out for them in terms of football wins.
Yeah.
That's fine. But there's also a reasonable chance to say that it'll force them to do something different that will allow the offense to evolve more. And that's a good thing in today's NFL. Reddit user, you already know, says this narrative of Lamar Jackson is better than Josh Allen because of the two MVPs is a narrative that grinds his gears. So let's talk about Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen in comparison. Two very uncontroversial and very easy players to talk about. So, first of all, Lamar Jackson. Would you say he's a top 5 quarterback?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. I agree.
Okay.
Right. Like, I think most people would agree that Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback. I would also say that the 2 MVP seasons that he has are, what's a good way of saying this? They're not unearned. He earned them. He was a great player. 2019 was, unanimous MVP.
He was good.
Like, he was pretty clearly the MVP that year. I don't think there was any real strong arguments against that. 2023, though, the fact that he got as many votes, as many first place votes as he did, and the fact that the only person that didn't vote for him in first place was Aaron Schatz, and that he admitted to it publicly and was like, yeah, I didn't vote for Lamar Jackson as MVP. I voted for Josh Allen, and here's why. And it was a great argument and a great thing that he actually wrote out. It was pretty impressive and ballsy that he actually said that and did that. It really shouldn't be viewed as that, though, because the fact that Lamar Jackson was this close to being the MVP, a second unanimous MVP for him for the season that he had in 2023, I don't buy that. Yeah,
when I made peace with the fact that he was going to win MVP with the second they beat the 49ers the way they did. And even though I disagreed with Lamar being the MVP last year, I was like, okay, sure, fine, whatever. He's going to get it because that's what happens with awards like this at the end of the season. That being said, when he got 49 votes out of 50 possible first place votes, the second I saw that, I looked at this award and said, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, we can't be in this world where 49 out of 50 people said that he should have been the unanimous MVP. And the fact that Aaron Schatz got as much blowback as he did, like, how did you not vote for Lamar? He should have been unanimous. The dude had 29 touchdowns this year. You cannot tell me that in the year 2023, a quarterback with 29 touchdowns deserves to be the unanimous MVP of the NFL. Josh Allen had 15 more touchdowns than Lamar Jackson last year and got one first place vote. It's insane. It completely degraded the value of the award. And then you look at the playoffs and you see what Josh Allen did compared to what Lamar Jackson did. And it's like, oh, wait, Josh was the better quarterback this year. We can't go back and change these votes, though. I still love Lamar. I think he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I actually think he's the third best quarterback in the NFL. But this idea that he's better than Josh because of those two awards is crazy to me.
Yeah, it's very weird. I just don't get the whole idea around that. But whatever. At some point, Josh Allen will get an MVP. I'm sure. Maybe. I don't know.
He can't even make the Pro Bowl, dude. So how's he going to
God. But Tyler Huntley can.
Mm-hmm.
Boy. All right. Reddit user JBomber81 says, Joe Burrow is the only quarterback that can beat Mahomes. This is pretty easy. Josh Allen has beaten Mahomes before. You could say that Josh Allen hasn't beaten Mahomes in the playoffs. That's fine. Whatever. I would also argue that's not entirely Josh Allen's fault.
Yeah, and if you compare the year, if you go to the year that Joe Burrow did beat them, compare Joe Burrow's stats against the Chiefs in that game and Josh Allen's stats, tell me that Josh Allen can't beat the Chiefs and that Joe Burrow can. Like, it's insane.
The Joe Burrow run to the Super Bowl in 2021, whatever it was.
21, I think.
Yeah. It was 2021. Yeah, it was definitely 2021. That was largely because the Bengals defense was incredible. Just absolutely ridiculous. And Joe Burrow, not great in those games.
Yeah.
Certainly didn't lose them that game. And especially in the Chiefs game, he actually played pretty well. But that Chiefs defense was also the worst defense that he faced in the playoffs. And, that's what happens. I'll also say that Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense is certainly different now than what it was then. And Zach Taylor has evolved in how he's called plays and how they decide to go about things. But regardless of all that, Josh Allen can beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs and in the regular season. And Joe Burrow is not the only one who can do it. And it's dumb that people try to frame it that way. User, do I have to have 123? Says Josh Allen can't beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. Well, we kind of just talked about that, so we're going to move on to the next one. The Thinker 21 says Josh Allen chokes against Chiefs. Again, we just kind of talked about that, so no. From Twitter, Scotty Bahoy 16, Josh Allen needs an elite wide receiver to be elite. We kind of talked about this with Diggs leaving, but also, if we're going to talk about sort of the evolution of this Bills offense, maybe it doesn't need to revolve around a wide receiver, and maybe this is why they drafted Dalton Kincaid and why they value James Cook being a pass-catching back and also Ray Davis having sure hands as a receiver, and being able to spread the ball out to multiple guys instead of funneling things through one primary target all the time and then having the other guys like Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir kind of just supplementing that.
Yeah, and I'll give people a little bit of credit that say this, though I do disagree with it. The same thing was said about Patrick Mahomes. It was when they got rid of Tyreek Hill, that people were like, nah, Patrick Mahomes going to suck now. And he still doesn't suck, surprisingly. And when people say it about Josh, I always try to think about that to remind myself, it's just people saying stuff. At the end of the day, Josh Allen's still going to be elite. It'd probably be nice if one of these young wide receivers becomes elite, but Allen's an elite quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. And we're on to our last take. At Casso Mike, his take that grinds his gears is Mahomes is in a class all his own, parentheses, a class we can't place Josh Allen in. So I'll let you go first. I'll formulate my thoughts and I'll let you go first.
So these things are always difficult for me because I think you can look at it with two lenses. the accomplishments that Patrick Mahomes has had in his career obviously outweigh the accomplishments of Josh Allen. He has 3 Super Bowls. He has 2 MVPs. Josh Allen has 0 Super Bowls, 0 MVPs, 1 second-team All-Pro. Like, that's Josh's only true accolade, is that second-team All-Pro. But when you look at, like, from a talent perspective, I do not think it's as far off as people are saying it is. I think Mahomes is the 1, and I think Josh is the 2, and I think that's pretty clear. The best way that I saw it described was, I think, by a Ravens fan, or maybe it was a Chiefs fan, that said Josh Allen is closer to 1 than he is to 5. Which I thought was a good way of talking about it. I think that if you were tiering quarterbacks and you said you have to have a minimum of 2 quarterbacks in every tier, then it's Josh and Mahomes are up here alone by themselves and everybody else is behind them. I don't know if I could put Allen in Mahomes' current tier, though, and be without being disingenuous. I think you have to separate Mahomes. You just have to.
Yeah. It's annoying and frustrating, but I would also agree with that Mahomes is actually in a category of his own, largely because of what he did this year, right? And being as consistent as he was throughout this season. And, you know, Mahomes was also part of the struggles that the Chiefs offense had. It's not like he was perfect necessarily, but there was also, more often than not, you saw his team letting him down versus Mahomes letting his team down. Yeah. And that's the sign of, I think, greatness of a quarterback, is when you can clearly look at that guy and be like, well, how are you letting this go to waste? Basically, you know, it's just, it doesn't make, it makes for frustrating football, but it also is interesting just to sort of see it all unfold before you when it does happen. And you saw it with Josh Allen and the Bills to an extent as well. And there were definitely times where Josh Allen was part of the problem last year. There were also times when Ken Dorsey was part of the problem last year. Or Joe Brady. Or whatever. You know, like, again, it's a team sport. It rarely comes down to one person or one position group even. So I think that regardless of all that, though, like what Patrick Mahomes has done on the field, with accomplishments and with great receivers and with terrible receivers, he's managed to do it all. And no other quarterback, I think, can really, truly claim that in the way that he has.
Yeah, and it's frustrating, too, because I think that Josh is going to go down as one of those uniquely special quarterbacks that people 10, 20 years from now are going to look back and say, that guy was so good, and I don't know if we appreciated him enough, but he's in an era with the quarterback that could go down as the greatest ever play the position.
100%. All right. That is going to do it for us. Thank you to every single one of you that submitted a take beforehand. Thank you to those who watched with us live. We appreciate you guys coming in and talking and being with us throughout this whole time. Long show this week. Long show. A lot of takes that we had to get through. A lot of stuff that we had to say. A lot of takes on takes, if you will. And we're gonna be back next week with something, I'm sure we'll think of something before next week. And before then, you know, if you like this particular show, thank you. Leave a like on your way out. Hit subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel. Hit subscribe on your podcast feed to get this in your feed every single week. Leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, etc. Whatever to help boost our engagement with those who are outside of our normal feed. And share this with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors. Leave a comment below if you are watching this afterwards, and we might come back and give you a little response here and there. If you want to subscribe to the other 2 Cover One channels, there's Cover One Fantasy with Chris Chuse, who puts out content, I think, basically every day, or at least it feels like every day. And there's also Cover One College Football with Daniel Harms and John Helmkamp, who do the Cover One Draft podcast, which is great. And they both do great work. And despite Daniel being a Chiefs fan, he's still a really good football person. So give them both follows on Twitter. Give them and their show some love. You can find the Air Raid Hour coming up in less than 10 minutes, almost 5 minutes now. You've got Under Review tomorrow night. You've got Sky's coverage. You've got the Cover One flagship show, Film Room. You've got Buffalo Late Night. You've got all sorts of different things. If you want to subscribe to Cover One Pass and support us directly, please do. It is the best way to support us for $60 a year. Ignore the $57 there. It's only $3 more now. You get all the stuff here. You get in-depth analysis. You get all sorts of reports and exclusive videos and breakdowns, and you get a nice t-shirt and decal and a nice letter from Eric and Aaron and Greg, and it's just it's the best way to support us directly as opposed to, you know, getting stuff from YouTube or Spreaker or whatever. You know, this is the best way to support us if you really enjoy all of that, and you also get to join a great community on Slack/Discord. I think we're trying to move everything to Discord, so yeah, just be aware of that. It's fun. It's a great time. It's a lot of people just like you who want to learn about football and are fans of the Bills and also have some other stuff that they want to talk about. So it's a great group, and we really appreciate all of our One Pass subscribers. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter. Like always, just drunk on that app, tweeting out nonsense, pissing some people off, or getting pissed off myself like today.
Exactly. You can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy on Twitter. We will see you all next week, and we hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.